So I'd love to invite my panel up onto stage now. We've got David Springall from Yospace. Please come up, everybody, take some seats. We've got David Springall from Yospace, who you've seen already. Nicklas Noorby from TV4. We've got David Benson from Google. Paul Crann from Seachange. And Ruth Cartwright from Amplifi. Now, just as they're getting seated, I'll give you a bit of info on what we're going to cover in this panel. Is this working? Can I get this working, please? There we go. So I warned you there was a lot of jargon. I've come up with a new one, TV 2.0. We're going to be talking about the opportunities and the challenges of, what do you call it, OTT, direct-to-consumer, kind of mobile apps, basically any form of TV that doesn't involve a broadcast and radio waves. I want to talk about audiences and data as well, because I think those are inextricably linked. And of course, I'd love to cover a bit of futurology at the very end. But before we do all this, we are going to play Jargon Bingo. So what is this? OK, so I've prepped my panelists here. We're going to hear from them what's their least favorite jargon in the industry, because you've heard so much today. OTT, DVE, VOD, I don't know, TLA, that's three-letter acronym. What I want you to do as an audience is you've got to listen to us, join the panel, and as soon as somebody says one of our least favorite jargon words, which is going to appear on the screen at the moment, you've got to shout bingo. And whoever shouts bingo first wins a rather lovely Videology goodie bag, which my favorite thing in here, I don't know why we have these, is a Videology hip flask, which just yesterday I filled up with some rather nice Patron Silver tequila. This is a sipping tequila, it's not shooting, but you can shoot it. And you can have this, join the panel, and look, we've got a Videology blanket, should you have a bit too much and want to have a snooze. So, without further ado, Jargon Bingo. What is, I can not have a phrase, I'm afraid. So my phrase, oh dear, I can't get this back in. My phrase is gaffer. And do you know why? It's not because I don't think this is an important thing. It's just that Apple aren't really doing much in this space at the moment. And Jonathan, is he still here? I saw he didn't have Apple on his slide. He had Netflix instead. So I think we should rename gaffer. I think we should call them Fang. Because it's got a bit more of a bite to it. OK, who's up next? So gaffer, that's my one. David, what is your phrase?
I think it's big data.
And why?
Oh, why? Because it's a bit ambiguous. It's used in every industry for different reasons. I think it's also used by the IT industry to sell more tin. It is actually real. It does have a meaning. Okay. And it is a very specific meaning, especially for advertising. But I hear it get misused a lot.
That's a very good point. Okay, by the way, the bingo doesn't start until we start the panel properly, just to warn you. Okay, who's up next? Nicklas.
Yes.
What's your phrase?
It's programmatic.
And why?
Well, I think it's a lot. It's very much overused in the TV industry, and for me, it's not core business as it is for Alexander and MTG. For us, core business is our content that we produce, and it's our user experience that we would like to evolve, and how we put it out there for advertisers to buy it. It's just not yet our core business. Programmatic is just not yet our core business. So, but we'll share a cab anyways to Heathrow after.
I think you're going to be watching out for that one, hey. Next up, David. What's your phrase?
My phrase is machine learning, and I'm particularly also known as AI. I find it particularly grating for two reasons. One is every time you mention it, people say, "Is it going to destroy the world?" And then in the same breath, people go, I actually have no idea what it is, but I'm expected to have an opinion, so I have to bullshit, which was an actual quote from a senior planner. And the truth is, it's going to be really useful in some areas, but it's not going to be very useful in other areas. And it leads back into, I'm not going to say the words.
You're allowed to say it at the moment. We're okay. We're a grace period. I say algorithm every other sentence. Even when I'm out at the pub with my friends. I'm a bit strange. Who's next? Ruth. Ruth, what is your word?
I said, well, actually, programmatic was one of them, but I would agree with that. But content. So if I hear anyone else say content is king, I think I'd throw myself off this stage this afternoon. But it's really about, everything is content. If it's UGC or premium broadcast, it's all content. It really needs to be sort of a focus on context and about the viewer and their experience in the right environment. And so that's why content always gets me.
I think that word is going to come pretty quickly. And finally, we have Paul. What is your jargon?
OTT. I mean, I think it means so many things to so many different people. I mean, obviously, when this thing called Netflix started to show up on broadband usage, going from 5 to 30 to, a big consumer of bandwidth, it meant one thing. Today we work with a lot of the traditional service providers. I mean, they're clearly moving to all IP and, moving to a converged architecture. You have many of the large players building massive networks, massive infrastructure themselves. So it's hard to say that a Facebook or a Google or an Amazon's not a facilities-based large operator. So, it just means so many different things. So I think it changes every year, too, what it really is.
I'm definitely going to be saying over the top when I'm questioning you. Okay, well, I think we are ready to get started. I'm slightly worried that I'm going to say one of these words in my first question. But can I just point out that if any of us say it, that's not the point. The point is to firstly make you pay attention. And secondly, it's just to make things fun a bit. So anybody who says one of these words, we're not. There's no problem with. There's nothing wrong with us, basically. The problem's with the audience, okay? But don't worry, there's some tequila in the bag. So I'd like to start off talking about this is so difficult. Broadcaster direct-to-consumer apps, because we've heard a lot of that so far. Nicklas, maybe we could start with you. What I'm interested by, to what extent is there reasons for broadcasters to favour these direct-to-consumer apps over their broadcast channels?
Yeah, I mean, favour or not favour, but I think it's really important if you're a publisher and you're a broadcaster and you would want to still be alive in a couple of years, that you have a direct relationship with your users. Yep. And I mean, for a broadcaster, just taste the word broadcaster. For me, it's old. It sounds old because it's you're telling someone we're broadcasting something for you and you have to watch it at a specific time, right? So moving forward for us, it's very, very important to shift our focus from a viewer to a user. Yeah. And of course, if you want to be able to do that in a good way and successfully, you need to, of course, have a D2C product.
Can I just say, I think he deserves a round of applause for not saying one of those words. It adds a certain edge to it, doesn't it? I've never done this before on a panel. Paul, would you like to comment on that as well? Because, I mean, you didn't really touch on monetization, but I guess monetization is a really important aspect of that. What's your view as a technology company? You work with both linear and direct-to-consumer apps, and do you see the broadcasters very much pushing more and more towards direct-to-consumer, and is it driven by monetization?
Well, it's complicated. I think it varies, right? I mean, monetization is a part of the business model, whether it's subscription or ad-based. So, I mean, you have to get paid for your content.
Oh, who was that? Was that Stuart Garfield? Oh, wow.
Sorry.
I was hoping to make you pay attention for like 40 minutes, but
yeah.
So I think you should have some of that tequila now. Yeah, get started.
That's right. What's the next class?
Oh dear. Sorry, do you want to keep going, or were you
I'm not sure.
thrown by that?
Get paid for your programming. So it all converges, right? I mean, people are going to have many different models. The traditional barriers are going away. You know, you see with traditional service providers, I mean, they're going to serve their installed base, but they're also going to go out of market in many different ways. So, you know, in the end, it's going to be about who has the best programming, who has the right platform for searchability, who has the right metadata, the right price points, and all that. So it's all coming together. So I think everybody has to innovate to survive.
Yeah.
And it's no longer, you know, an MSO against a telco, or, you know, there's all the parties at the table, and everybody's got to make the right decision. Do they continue to go through distribution because that's the best platform for their programming and the right economics, or do they have to go direct for any number of reasons?
Yeah. And Ruth, from an agency perspective, do you particularly care whether broadcasters are focusing more on their linear or more on these new forms of distribution?
Yeah,
Would you like to see them moving more in one direction?
I think it's a good thing. I think it's exciting. I mean, we're going from sort of panel-based measurement to more impression-level data and your ad delivery. And you can go from, you know, sort of age, demo, location, through to your behavioural pieces around sort of income and everything else. But I think we don't need to lose focus of the fact that the broadcast, what they're doing, you know, what TV does is deliver, you know, sort of mass reach incredibly well still. And it just, this sort of element just allows us to sort of target better than we have done previously. But it's a good thing, it's exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, please.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking that it's also a prerequisite if you want to build a scalable SVOD offering. You need to.
Of course, but is that SVOD with advertising or SVOD without?
No, that's well, okay. That was a shortening. It's for me that is subscription video on demand. So it's not for advertising.
Yeah. But
it could be in the future a mix of it.
Yeah, it's already been mentioned. We heard yesterday a few industry luminaries saying that Netflix was going to die within 2 years if it didn't start advertising. I think I'd be interested to see that. David?
Just to add to that comment, I think one bit we've missed in all of this is actually the consumer experience. And, you know, I certainly, when I decide, you know, I want to watch something, I have to go and choose, well, am I going to watch it on my Fire Stick to watch Amazon, or am I going to go and use a Chromecast, or am I going to use TV? Or, you know, I need an assistant to actually go across all the devices that I need to plug into these places. And it gets to the stage, I'm being a big rugby fan, I have to Google to read the Telegraph to tell me where to watch the rugby, right? That's a problem. And I think the interesting thing will be, how do we start to solve that for the consumer and just give them a better viewing experience?
Yeah. And from your experience at Google, I know quite a few years ago, a number of the UK broadcasters moved across into distributing long form on YouTube. I'm not sure if they still are anymore. What are the trends there? Are broadcasters generally trending towards YouTube, or are they trending away from YouTube for long-form content?
You know, to me, I loved Jonathan Allen's presentation earlier. That, to me, just showed how smart you can be, right? And at the end of the day, they've got, you know, all these different opportunities which they're maxing out in every way. So they're not actually sort of going, oh, we're not going to do this or we're not going to do that. They're just going to say, what works for me, and I'm going to persecute that opportunity. And that's exactly what we see. You know, if you want to reach certain audiences, you'd be cutting your nose off to spite your face if you didn't put it on YouTube. But equally, then you're saying, how do we add value to that, both for the consumer and for the advertiser, and then feeding that back into the loop. I love that presentation. It was really smart stuff.
But I mean, I know the broadcasters have a very strong relationship with YouTube with respect to short form, but is long form happening that much on YouTube anymore? Or?
Yeah, long form is growing.
Yeah, but broadcast long form specifically.
Broadcast, I'd have to look into that specifically on a country by country basis, because every broadcaster works in a different way. But yeah, absolutely. And you know, we had some interesting cases with HBO and with Netflix, where they've been saying to people, look, we've got a whole series we want you to watch. So let me give you a taste of what it's like, and this is why you need to come to me. So yeah, absolutely.
And David, I understand. I remember, I think a few ITV presentations I've seen where they said that live linear is their fastest growing area of distribution, essentially digital distribution, TV 2.0, whatever you want to call it. Is that what you're seeing? You seem to...
I think that in the case of ITV, they've identified themselves as the live, that's one of their core competencies. I think that it's a wider statement that that broadcasters, while they have all this content which we would call VOD, that they transmit in a linear fashion, they also produce quite a lot of live stuff still. Some of that has moved over to pay TV, but there is still a lot of live content, and they have very good core competencies of producing that content. And therefore, we see that the broadcasters that have these core competencies of producing live content should work very hard to keep the monetization of that content, that live content, to kind of keep the Netflixes out that are not known for that for that type of content.
Yeah. Ruth, from an agency point of view, is this, maybe this is too tough a question, I don't know, tell me to piss off if it is, but is live linear and, all these OTT... Yeah, I don't have any more gifts, sorry. I saw all these new forms of distribution, are they tapping into new advertising budgets? Is it budgets that are shifting across from digital to TV spend?
No, I don't think so. I mean, if you're talking about sort of Netflix and the Amazon Primes and people like that, actually they are a challenge to normal broadcasters, because you're talking about, I mean, even if you look at the budgets that they have to spend on programming, I mean, you only have to look at the Grand Tour recently. I appreciate BBC is not commercial TV, but it's such a step change, and there is a huge challenge around that for broadcasters. But beyond that, actually, it's an opportunity, and it's an opportunity for broadcasters because they're still chasing and trying to sort of emulate premium broadcasting programming, and that's really interesting. There's also an element of, if you look at sort of Amazon Prime, that's a really interesting sort of e-commerce model. Yeah. Is it eating into budgets right now from an agency point of view? No, but there's certainly conversations around how they're an addition to a plan that's maybe not a norm, but that extra sort of 10%, that innovation piece for clients.
But most specifically though, you have obviously your linear traded deals with the broadcasters. When they're opening up live linear for, say, big sporting events and everything like that, is that essentially extra spend that's being dedicated towards live linear for the fact that suddenly they have this new form of, or this very rapidly growing form of inventory that's highly targetable?
Yeah, I think it'd be sort of remiss for broadcasters not to monetize that in a different way. Yeah. But equally, from an agency point of view, we obviously don't want to be taking extra budget out and putting it somewhere else and sort of increasing costs for clients. Yeah. But it's certainly, I would prefer that it was sort of an add-on, if you like.
In the break earlier, David did say that he was totally happy for search spend to move across to TV, didn't you? Yeah.
That'd be good to know.
Actually, to be nice to you now, having just teased you mercilessly. When I first read the spec for this session and I was reading direct to consumer, I had no idea what that meant. And I actually thought, direct to consumer, I thought the concept was actually around the production studios creating direct relationships with consumers instead. So whether it's the Fremantles of this world or the Disneys or whoever, are you seeing that to be a rapidly growing phenomenon through YouTube?
Yeah, I think an interesting thing is exactly that, right? Which is, at what point do you have a big enough body of content that you can start sort of curating it and reach a critical mass yourself? And you saw that wonderful example in Sweden where you go, actually, we're sort of a MCN channel hybrid broadcast sort of thing, working in every direction, and they're huge. I mean, Splay's massive on YouTube, but equally they've got a really interesting body of content that's coming through from the other routes. So again, if you're someone like a Disney or an HBO, you can start to do that. On the other hand, if you are a mid to small size production house that's making great stuff, Great British Bake Off. You've got to get someone else to help you distribute that.
Yeah.
And I think that's the real value, and understanding who your best partner to distribute that would be. Whether you want someone who's got huge, local roots who are able to, really give you penetration in that market, or whether you're actually saying, I'm making something which is very relevant to a large group of people, but they're very dispersed, in which case you'd sort of go with a YouTube. Yeah. And so you're seeing both of those happen, would be the answer. And
Paul, from an ad tech point of view, obviously from a video tech point of view, one of the opportunities available to people like Disney and Discovery is that they can actually create their own apps and direct-to-consumer apps. I believe Discovery has Dplay, Disney has Disney Life. Do you work with any of the content producers at all, or are you just solely focused on broadcast? And do you see that as a growing market? Do you have people at Seachange who are focusing on speaking to the content producers to try and enable this kind of monetization?
Yeah, we live in both worlds. We're in the ad tech space and we're in the video distribution space. So, I look at it when I go home and spend time in my own home. I mean, the line's blurred between what's linear, what's catch up, what's time shift, what's VOD. I mean, nobody in my home speaks these terms except me. What we're seeing is when people turn on I'm late to get home, I want to restart the show, or I get a phone call or a disruption, I have to pause. What are you in there? Are you linear or time shift? So to me, it all kind of blurs. And then nobody's big enough to have all content sources. So we're working with a lot of customers, for example, on content management solutions where we can integrate the metadata from Netflix, present that as part of the service provider platform. And then if it's not available on the provider platform and the preferred shelf, then at least it's available and they can click out to Netflix or Disney or whomever. So I think at the end of the day, it all really converges. I mean, people clearly want to watch TV on any device, anytime, and that's more and more time shift in IP. And then there has to be collaboration. I mean, there's always going to be some stuff you have exclusive, some stuff you can get on multiple platforms. In the end, it's who serves the consumer with the right pricing, the right searchability, and the whole package, right? Yep. And it's going to be a lot of sharing, I think.
Ruth, so on this concept of the production houses going straight to consumers with, I think is it Disney Life? Is it which you pay? I think is it £6 a month or something for? I'm a massive Disney fan.
How much it is,
massive,
but it's
massive.
Disney Life.
Can't wait to Frozen 2. I've watched that film 20 times, not willingly. Are you at agencies starting to find yourselves in new relationships with these kind of content producers that are distributing to consumers?
I think from an AV team perspective, no. I mean, it's just an extension of Disney and our relationship with them. Yeah. From a content perspective, I think there's a lot more conversations around sort of program finance and those content relationships from potentially what Amplifi is like a Story Lab position, which is our sponsorship division. Yeah. So there's the relationships and the partnerships and the conversations that are happening are more frequently.
So at the moment, no cannibalisation of TV budget?
Not at the moment.
Yay! Sorry, ex-TV person. I thought, actually, we can't really not mention kind of cord cutting and Netflix. We've touched on it a tiny bit. Nicklas, from a broadcast point of view, we've been asking this question for years about, the Netflix threat. I remember when I used to be at ITV, we'd talk about it just hitting DVD sales and stuff like that. Not sure if that was completely the truth. Nodding at some ITV people. Do you properly view Netflix as a threat now in terms of maybe even just educating young people not to expect adverts, pulling them away from TV?
I would say that in Sweden, we've been forced to see Netflix as a competitor for a long time because, for example, Netflix, one of the first countries that when they moved out of the US, they moved into Scandinavia before they went into a lot of much larger areas of the world. So it's been around for quite some time. And also for HBO, same thing. The first country outside of the US they went into was Sweden or Scandinavia. Yeah. So we've been forced to live with them as a player for a long time. And I think for us that's why, I mean, the strategies from a broadcaster point of view is very, I think it's a little bit funny because it's very similar. I mean, the MTG strategy is very similar to TV4's. I think Channel 4's presentation here is very similar. I mean, we have to make sure that we are, that we have a D2C offering, both AVOD and SVOD, that is something that the user wants. And that's a little bit difficult, or more difficult than being a broadcaster having a viewer only. Yeah. Because, of course, the users are and should be more demanding because they have a lot more choices in their mobile phone, for example. Yep. So, yes, of course, they're competing with us about your time watching. Yeah. Not watching content, they're watching moving images.
Yeah. So from an experience point of view, it's pretty difficult. What about from a technology point of view, and especially things like technology around measurement as well? Have you been involved with that, I assume, quite a bit at Yospace?
Yes, I mean, to an extent. I mean, we are actually more of a stream management business than we are an analytics company. We certainly know that all of our customers treat measurement as being, absolutely critical, not just in measurement of ads, but actually from a research perspective in terms of the content that is put on. I mean, I think going back to the one of the reasons why you would go D2C in the first place is to capture that data. Netflix are doing that, and so are Amazon in spades. And if you don't compete, at their own game, you're not going to succeed. I mean, there is a whole industry out there convinced that Netflix can be played against. OVPs, many different OVPs, different businesses that are providing end-to-end solutions for the Netflix problem. And what is behind all of that is analytics and data. Well, that is big.
Okay. Actually, I'd like to talk about data for a bit, and let's move away from kind of Netflix and SVOD again, back to D2C or whatever it's called. So we're back on kind of broadcaster apps and things like that. Obviously, data and measurement is absolutely key. At the moment, there's a bit of a kind of walled garden approach going on here. I mean, I think everybody's guilty of it to a certain extent. I mean, Ruth, how painful is it to you, this walled garden approach, this inability to measure reach and frequency?
It feels as though it's a bit sort of Groundhog Day. I feel as though we've been having this conversation for a few years now, that data is the thing that, and some transparency in the walled gardens, and it's the thing that clients constantly ask us at agencies. They want to know, it's very difficult for us to be able to plan, buy, and sort of execute campaigns across all of these different media owners and platforms. You can't control the reach, the frequency. I mean, first-party data would be ideal from broadcasters, but we can't do that yet. And then there's a limitation or sort of a block around third-party data, and clients are using that and trying to access it. And ironically, if you think, the broadcasters actually have got the least to worry about. They've got, good player sizes, viewability. It's just that it doesn't seem to be. There's no sort of steps in place at the moment. I don't feel as though we've made any progress in that area. And it will be certainly absolutely top of the agenda for 2017 for us as an agency as well.
Yeah, try and break down those walls.
Yeah.
David from Google refused to let me ask him this question. So I'm going to ask, I don't know, Nicklas, maybe you instead. No, don't worry. Do you think Google and Facebook will be pressured into opening up their data?
Oh, wow, great question. You didn't talk to me about this question.
Oh, yeah, I did. But to be fair, you're not setting Google and Facebook strategy, so I don't think it matters what you say.
I hope. I really hope that they will be pressured from the buyers and the industry to open up and be more transparent. I think we had quite some good examples quite recently why they should and why the advertisers should put more pressure on them.
Yep.
Of course, I think that.
And if they open up their data, will you?
Oh yes, we already do.
Okay.
In Sweden, we do.
David.
So we're 100% for full transparency.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm now going to ask David the question that he said I could ask him. Can we enable data sharing across the industry, and what are the barriers we need to overcome?
So the same question, really. Yeah. So, I mean, just being completely open, right? I'm just the wrong person to ask that question to.
I did ask Eric Schmidt, by the way. He was David Benson was Eric Schmidt's second choice.
There you go.
Yeah.
If you sort of if Eric emails you, you can just read it out. I think there's a number of issues going on here, and when we talk about data, we talk about it from an industry advertising perspective. But actually, if you look at data, the big things you have to be concerned with first are privacy and security. Tesco's had a bit of a blip recently. TalkTalk had a bit of a blip. There's a massive hack across the whole of the West Coast in the US only 2 weeks ago, right? Those are things which are genuine issues for the industry. And it doesn't take much for one slip like that, and consumer confidence will be massively, massively rattled, and then we've all got an even bigger problem, right? So the first thing is we just need to accept and understand the parameters on which this game is being played, and it is far more than just where are we going to stick the next ad, right? I think that's really important. The other side is, I mean, we do share a lot of data already. We share a lot of data with ad agencies. We share a lot of. I was having a discussion with a chap over there about there's some great stuff they're doing with YouTube APIs. So there is a whole load of data that is being shared. I think it's important to say what data, right? 20 petabytes a week takes up a lot of space. What data are we talking about here, and how are we going to use it in a way which is privacy secure, privacy sensitive, secure, and actually builds value for advertisers.
Yep.
And I think it actually leans into one of your later questions, which is fundamentally, we need to move to an advertising model which is all about, is this working for me as a brand? Is it building my brand equities? Am I selling more stuff as a result of that? And as long as I'm doing that, right, and I can measure that, it becomes a lot less important as to, okay, well, have I reached this person on Netflix or on YouTube or on ITV? No, I'm selling more stuff to more people. We can all go home. So maybe the solution is actually to look to the end rather than try and rebuild sort of the bridges of the past.
So what you're trying to say is that if you've got a walled garden, as long as you've got a search monopoly with attribution modeling, then you're totally fine. Sorry, I'm teasing again. I'm teasing.
But I think what is interesting, right, is when you actually do things like market mix modeling across all of these walled gardens or whatever you want to call them. Who's providing value? Who's genuinely shifting more stuff for you? And that's when it starts getting interesting.
Clients are legitimately able to ask the question around sort of transparency and data, as should agencies, because if we're as an industry, and Google and the Facebook and agencies talking about, we know TV viewing is in good health, but we know it's changing, and some of that is going to online video and to Google and to Facebooks and everything. If we're asking them to shift their media budgets, we have a responsibility to be able to justify and rationalise that. And I know I get the privacy and the security questions, but there is still always the conversation back with clients when they're sat talking to their marketing managers about, okay, what are we actually getting for this? What are we seeing? Where is it being delivered? I think that's just a sort of prerequisite for good media buying. The
voice of reason, as ever, by the person who represents the money. I think a very good point.
But just one remark here, because now I saw a chance here. Because I agree on you got to follow the regulations, and the privacy is but it's all different in different areas of the world, right? And in Sweden, we're a very liberal country. And since you and I met before, I have a proposition then, because in Sweden we're very liberal, and the social security numbers and the public records are very open. So I invite you guys at YouTube to join our common currency on online video in Sweden, and hopefully...
I'm more than happy to shake your hand. Exactly. I think all these initiatives actually are really good ideas, right? They're great ideas because at the end of the day, a system that works better is one that works better for everyone.
Yeah.
And the more money you put in, the more money the content makers get, the better the content that gets made. I had a really interesting chat with Paul Dyson, who works for Data to Decisions, and we were talking with Nick Manning, who obviously media auditing, and Paul's point was really clear. He just said, all of this stuff it goes away when you actually look at the return on investment, which is, am I making more than I'm putting in? Viewability isn't an issue, because if this is more efficient at selling stuff than that, right, it accounts for that in the system. So I'm not saying, and I'm completely up with you, we need to get much clearer and we need to be able to help people plan and we need to let agencies make those decisions. And we do work with the agencies to try and give them more data. But we also just need to move, we're trying to do what we used to do in the 1950s with 21st century technology, right? And what we need to do is actually, what does 21st century marketing look like? And how do we prove that out? Because that's where you're really going to add value to the whole system.
Yeah. Okay, I'm aware that we're getting very close to the break. Does anybody in the audience have a question? Okay, well, think about them for a moment whilst I ask a really ridiculous question, which is, okay, David, are you up for this? Paul, David, who wants the ridiculous question?
Oh, I'll do ridiculous question.
Okay, if broadcast TV was hit by an asteroid tomorrow, what would emerge from the rubble?
What size asteroid? Like?
Some sort of crazy meteor storm that takes out all of... And what I'm focusing on, is aerials and, say, Archiva's just totally shafted, basically.
Right.
So let's say every single transmission aerial in the whole world and satellite is destroyed. What would happen?
What would happen? People would read books. No. I mean, I think that...
to what extent would a broadcast network be built again? Or would it be all OTT?
I think that it would... assuming that the risk of this asteroid storm was not going to happen again, I think that people would just rebuild it, because I think it's significant enough in an industry for it to be worth rebuilding that infrastructure. If every single playout centre got destroyed, you might argue that broadcast television would be built using IP-based technologies, and it would be built in a slightly different, with a slightly different perspective. But I think that the idea that if we lost TV tomorrow, there wouldn't be a very good business case to rebuild it.
Yeah. Paul, you look desperate to actually jump in on this.
Well, I mean, again, I think that the data we see with our customers is, again, sports, news, but even in those domains, once they enable catch-up, time shift, the usage skyrockets, right? DVR. So, in essence, the viewing habits have shifted already. The technology is shifted. I mean, the traditional operators have more of a legacy, but they're moving to IP-centric architectures. The web crowd is already coming in there. So, to me, it's, in essence, we're already there, and there's no going back. So the asteroid's not going to be dramatic, one hit and you're done, but it's already happening.
Yeah. We have time for one question. Anybody got a burning question? Is the question, did Google just really do a deal with TV4 to open up data in Sweden? The answer is yes. And on that note, I'd like to thank our panel for a great session. Thank you very much.